According to supporters of the historical status quo, Brushy Bill Roberts' true identity was Oliver Pleasant Roberts, who according to the 1900 census was born on August 26, 1879 in Arkansas, and therefore wasn't old enough to be Billy the Kid. Many problems exist with this belief. First and foremost is the vast amount of statements and documents that exist which show that Brushy Bill Roberts was working in places in the late 1880s and early 1890s, during which Oliver P. Roberts would have been a small child. Please keep in mind that the purpose of this video is not to prove Brushy Bill Roberts' genealogy, as I will do that in a later video. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate simply that Brushy Bill and Oliver P. were two different and distinct individuals. Also, bear in mind that Brushy Bill Roberts' true name was William Henry Roberts, and I will use those two names at various points throughout the video. Furthermore, in this video, I will focus solely on the period between 1882 and 1896, when Roberts worked as a cowboy, a bronco buster, or for different law enforcement agencies tracking horse thieves, specifically the Pinkerton Detective Agency, a deputy U.S. Marshal at Fort Smith, Arkansas, and the Anti-Horse Thief Association. With that said, let's examine the evidence. According to Roberts, during the spring of 1888, he took a job with the Pinkerton Detective Agency. This was confirmed via former horse thief detective Jim Copeland, who told attorney William V. Morrison in an interview on November 30th, 1949, quote, "Roberts was a Pinkerton man in 1888 or 1889, I can't remember which, but he chased horse thieves for that bunch along the Red River from Texas to the Indian Territory." End quote. Later that same year, Roberts was involved in an incident at Round Top Mountain that was verified in a letter dated August 25, 1951, from Jack Berlin. To Ola Everhart, Berlin stated, quote, "Roberts, if I remember him right, was a horse thief detective. I was with him one night at a dance at the Round Top Mountain in the Creek Nation where there was some shooting done. I was shot through the left shoulder and left for dead. Roberts laid down on the floor and feigned death until the shooting was over." End quote. It is worth noting that Oliver P. Roberts would have been between 9 and 10 years old at this time and was still living with his parents in Arkansas. According to Roberts, he left the Pinkertons for the Anti-Horse Thief Association in the fall of 1888. In the book Alias Billy the Kid by William V. Morrison and C.L. Sonnichsen, two photographs are presented that support Roberts' claim that he was a member of the Anti-Horse Thief Association during the time he claimed. First is a badge that Roberts still possessed at the time of his death. The badge depicts a small image of a horse's head made of bone and with a yellow gold wire bridle. In a letter dated May 13, 1951, from Hodge Bailey, Secretary of the Anti-Thief Association, Illinois Division, to William V. Morrison, Bailey states, quote, "I am familiar with the pin you mentioned. It was put out in the early days of the Anti-Horse Thief Association." End quote. The second photograph shows Roberts on a horse which has a large C brand under its mane. Bailey confirmed the C brand, stating, quote, "This was the brand of the Anti-Horse Thief Association." End quote. It is worth noting that some neo-historians and supporters of the historical status quo deny that the Anti-Horse Thief Association ever existed. This baseless assertion, like most of their other claims, can be easily dismissed with the following citations. In a letter dated May 14, 1951, from James L. Westfall, Secretary of the Anti-Thief Association, West Oklahoma Division, to William V. Morrison, Westfall states, quote, "The Anti-Thief Association of which you requested information is the modern name of the Anti-Horse Thief Association. However, they are the same. It was first organized by Major McKee, a veteran of the Civil War who lived in Missouri, for the purpose of assisting officers in capturing horse thieves. He first organized it in 1864. It has since been modernized and now for law enforcement of all kinds, and its motto, 'Bring the guilty to justice,' and is established on the principles of humanity, justice, and charity. It is the only organization of its kind, which as such stands with the organized peace officers and uniformed police, for the enforcement of law and order. In its beginning, the membership was not known by those outside the order. Those outside the law endeavored to gain membership but were soon discovered and expelled. This order is actually credited with the capture of numerous notorious men in its early days, the most known being the Younger Brothers. At present, the National Order is composed of 5 divisions, which have jurisdiction over the whole of the United States. They are Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, East Oklahoma, and West Oklahoma. The greater part of Texas comes under the jurisdiction of the West Oklahoma Division." End quote. In the book, The Return of the Outlaw Billy the Kid, by W.C. Jameson and Frederick Bean. Jameson writes, quote, "On February 9, 1983, Teresa O'Gwen Capps, an employee of the University of Oklahoma Western Collections Library, confirmed the history of the Anti-Horse Thief Association." End quote. Now that we've established the existence of the Anti-Horse Thief Association, let's continue with the primary focus of this video. According to Robert Lee, who worked as a bodyguard for Buffalo Bill Cody, quote, "Roberts was riding in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in Chicago, Illinois in 1893, and that the Kid was one of the best riders in the show." End quote. He also added that several friends and co-workers at this time said they had known Roberts since 1885. Brushy Bill Roberts claimed he rode a horse called Cyclone in 1889 at Cheyenne, Wyoming, and won a sizable purse. Supporters of the historical status quo claim that no proof of any horse known as Cyclone exists. I think you know where this is going. Brushy Bill Roberts' claim that he rode a horse known as Cyclone in 1889 was covered in the publication called Bit and Spur magazine. Additionally, the magazine was quoted in two separate publications, the first being the Hinton Record Special Edition on July 13, 1948, and also the Heiko News Review, stating, quote, "He, Brushy Bill Roberts, was a champion bronc-buster in 1889 at Cheyenne, riding Cyclone." End quote. In Billy the Kid, an autobiography by Daniel Edwards, Edwards cites a January 16, 1888 article in the Fort Worth Daily Gazette, which states, quote, "A great sweepstakes for 2-year-old horses, open to the state, will take place the first day. Entrance fee of $20. The great event will be a match race between R.L. Dunman's Mark Belmont and J.J. Jackson's horse Cyclone, 445 yards for $2,200 a side. The money now is up for deposit as a forfeit, and the race has created great excitement and interest, and many people are expected here." End quote. Edwards also cites an article dated April 21, 1895 in the Fort Worth Gazette, titled "Bad Men with Records," that details an encounter with a man calling himself the Texas Kid, a well-known nickname Roberts was known to use during this time period. The article even gives a description which is consistent with Brushy Bill Roberts, paying special attention to his unique eyes. Furthermore, Roberts' account of riding Cyclone in 1889 is verified by Steve Hicks in the Steve Hicks papers located in the Autry Library. Rocky Mountain Steve Hicks was a friend of Brushy Bill Roberts, and the two men would often run into one another on various Wild West shows and rodeo competitions. In addition to Cyclone, Hicks also recounts Roberts riding a horse called Crazy Fox in Old Mexico in 1893. This is further verified by statements of two of Roberts' friends, Jim Keever and Barney Gibbs, who stated, "Roberts, at the invitation of the Cattlemen's Association, traveled through Mexico and then Argentina in 1893, participating in rodeos during which he rode a horse called Zebra Dan and one called Wild Hyena." The following individuals signed a statement on June 29, 1936, verifying that Roberts was a U.S. Marshal in 1892 and that he was an accomplished rodeo rider and roper. The signers also included how long they had been acquainted with Roberts. M.L. Laird, 44 years, known since 1892. T.O. Stringer, 40 years, since 1896. J.D. Castleberry, 42 years, since 1894. Frank Dalton, 55 years, since 1881. DeWitt Travis, 43 years, since 1893. T.A. Graham, 45 years, since 1891. E.D. Hayes, 40 years, since 1896. W.T. Weatherford, 40 years, since 1896. B.B. Blackman, 40 years, since 1896. And Jasper Mills, 42 years, since 1894. Once again, it should be worth noting that Oliver P. Roberts would have been either a small child or a teenager when Brushy Bill was known to these men, and according to the 1900 census, was still living with his parents in Arkansas. According to James R. Smith, Chief Deputy Marshal of the Western District of Arkansas, in a letter dated April 23, 1981, to William Tunstall, there was a William Roberts employed at the time Roberts claimed he was there between 1888 and 1889. Supporters of the historical status quo insist this is a mere coincidence, that since the man didn't use Brushy Bill's middle initial of H, they dismiss him as a match. However, two men who worked at Fort Smith with Roberts verified that he worked there when he claimed. Justin Ballard, who worked with Roberts in 1892, and D.H. McCook, who worked with him in 1888, confirmed this by an interview dated November 11, 1949, with William V. Morrison. The assertion that Brushy Bill Roberts and Oliver P. Roberts were two different individuals has been verified by at least two family members. The first account appeared in Alias Billy the Kid by William V. Morrison and C.L. Sonnichsen and told the account of Monroe Dudley Heath, who knew both men and was married to Oliver P. Roberts' cousin Martha. Mr. Heath, upon hearing someone was trying to pass Brushy Bill off as Oliver, loudly proclaimed, quote, "That's not Ollie," end quote. The second account is taken from Miss Elaine Hawes and was published in the book Billy the Kid and Me Were the Same by William A. Tunstall. Hawes states, quote, "From Grandmother's Bible it gives the name Oliver Pleasant Roberts, who was my uncle, born in 1879, and being a first cousin to William Henry Roberts, alias Brushy Bill Roberts," end quote. This is verified by the Martha Veda Roberts Family Bible, which verifies Brushy Bill Roberts' account of his genealogy and his true birth date being December 31st, 1859. According to author W.C. Jameson, in his book Billy the Kid Beyond the Grave, quote, "In 1988, researcher and writer William A. Tunstall mistakenly identified William Henry Roberts as Oliver P. Roberts. Since then, others attempting to discredit William Henry have parroted this error. Oliver Pleasant Roberts, a cousin, was born in 1879 in Arkansas and married a woman named Anna, all of which is documented by the family Bible mentioned by Nolan, as well as a marriage certificate and by census records. The Bible mentioned by Nolan belonging to the family of Henry Oliver Roberts, the brother of James Henry and uncle to William Henry Roberts, alias Billy the Kid, it contains little pertinent information about James Henry's descendants. William Henry Roberts had no nieces. The family Bible that was in the possession of William Henry Roberts when he died had its origins with the family of James Henry Roberts. It was passed on to William Henry's widow, Melinda, and later to her grandson, Bill Allison, and is currently in the possession of his descendants. This Bible lists William Henry Roberts' birth date as December 31st, 1859. For most of his life, William Henry Roberts used the alias Oliver L., but never Oliver P. Moreover, handwriting analyses of William Henry and Oliver Pleasant leave no doubt that the two men are indeed two different persons." End quote. Throughout my more than 30 years of researching Roberts' claim, I received vast amounts of letters and emails from supporters of the historical status quo. In one of these communications, one prominent supporter, one who is quite known in the Billy the Kid Lincoln County War research community, stated, quote, "Look, I'm not arguing the fact that Roberts' case, when considering the supporting evidence, is hard to argue. He knew little-known facts of the Lincoln County War, and I can't explain how he was able to give such a detailed description of the layout of the Lincoln County Jail at the time that the kid made his escape. My problem is that to accept the possibility that Roberts was the kid means that one has to embrace the thought of conspiracy, and more specific, conspiracy theories, and that's one leap I'm not willing to take." End quote. At least 18 individuals have documented working with Roberts ranging from the mid-1880s to the middle 1890s. Now, considering the topic of this presentation, in order for one to believe that William Henry Roberts and Oliver P. Roberts were one and the same, one must believe that every one of these men who most didn't know one another, most were from different places at different times, were all lying. Wouldn't that mean that these 18 men would be working in conjunction with one another in some sort of secret plan? Isn't that conspiracy by definition? In summation, absolutely no evidence exists that show that Brushy Bill Roberts and Oliver P. Roberts were the same person, and that he most certainly wasn't born in 1879. To recap this series so far, the neo-historians and supporters of the historical status quo list 4 primary reasons that Brushy Bill Roberts wasn't Billy the Kid. 1. That Brushy Bill Roberts was illiterate, and Billy the Kid could not only read but possessed a beautiful handwriting. In episode 1 of this series, titled, "Was Brushy Bill Roberts Illiterate?" I debunked this. Their second reason is that Brushy Bill Roberts couldn't speak Spanish, and Billy the Kid was fluent in Spanish. In episode 2 of this series, titled, "Could Brushy Bill Roberts Speak Spanish?" I debunked this claim. Their third reason is that prior to claiming to be Billy the Kid, Brushy Bill Roberts claimed to have been a member of the James Gang. In episode 3 of this series, titled, "Did Brushy Bill Roberts Really Claim to be a Member of the James Gang?" I debunked this. And their fourth reason is that Brushy Bill Roberts couldn't be Billy the Kid because he was really Oliver P. Roberts and wasn't old enough to be Billy the Kid. And I believe I've adequately debunked this claim as well in this episode. Now that all the purported evidence against Brushy Bill Roberts' claim to being the real Billy the Kid has been proven to be completely unfounded, I will now begin presenting Roberts' case in the upcoming videos. We will examine Roberts' genealogy, his detailed account of his days as Billy the Kid, including his time in Arizona, Silver City, the Lincoln County War, the shooting in Fort Sumner, and his life after his days as Billy the Kid, up to his death on December 27, 1950, in Hyco, Texas. You will hear the accounts of people who actually knew Billy the Kid during the Lincoln County War era, and who positively identified him as being the real Billy the Kid. You will see forensic evidence that supports his claim, as well as a detailed facial recognition study conducted by the University of Texas Austin that used the same program used by law enforcement agencies throughout the world. We'll re-examine the details of the Fort Sumner shooting in great detail and separate fact from fiction using the original sources. I'll see you again real soon in the next video. Until then, stay tuned, and thank you for watching.